Would you figure I've done this enough that I've muted myself? Well, it's appropriate. The last event of WaterDocs, and I muted myself. Just to repeat, it's ReSurge Canadian Film Festivals for a Livable Climate. And I'm your host, Rick Miller. Despite all my experience, I kept him muted, but no longer, because we have a big event tonight to celebrate the end of the 10th anniversary of the WaterDocs Film Festival. And I'd like to thank Drawdown Toronto, Drawdown Alberta, Drawdown BC for being the initiators of this event and for making it part of the 2021 ReSurge Festival. We're so happy to be co-hosting this event with 3 Drawdown chapters from across Canada in celebration of our 10th anniversary. Yay, happy anniversary, us, raise a glass. But before we get to the main event, which is a conversation with Paul Hawken. Yes, I'm a fan. I'm fanboying. I'd like to acknowledge how grateful the WaterDocs team and I are to be living, creating, and working on land that has been the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Petun, and most recently Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations for thousands of years. This land, also known as Takaranto, is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of Ojibwe Allied Nations to peaceably care for and share the lands and resources around the Great Lakes. And subsequent First Nations and peoples, Europeans, settlers, all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And we encourage you, wherever you are in the world, whether you're on Turtle Island, which is North America, or elsewhere, to reflect on the land that you're on, to think of who the caretakers and the keepers are, to consider the treaty relationship, or if you're indeed on unceded territory. Now, as I mentioned before, tonight's event is a big collaboration of drawdown movements across Canada with WaterDocs. Now, drawdown movements support local, community-based action to realize national climate goals, building connections and supporting work that ensures a healthy world for offspring of all species for all generations to come. And both WaterDocs and ReSurge are based on the knowledge that water is life. You've heard us say it over the course of the week. This is what we believe to be true. And you'll notice throughout the evening, Paul Hawken's new movement, which is Regeneration, is about the resurgence of the life force that is inherent in all natural systems. And this makes tonight's event timely because not only is this a time when we all need to have our collective voices raised to help mitigate and reverse the effects of the climate crisis, but it's also the end of the live streaming portion of our ReSurge Festival, which continues on demand until November 30th. And as of tomorrow, special announcement, listen carefully, as of tomorrow, November 15th, we will be reducing the cost of the All Access Festival from $25 to $12.50. That's a whopping 50% off, folks, and we invite everyone to check out the 40 plus films available 24/7 until the end of the month. So come celebrate with us. Check us out at the waterdocs.ca/resurge festival. And hey, while you're at it, we also encourage you to use the chat box to say hello, to communicate with each other, introduce yourselves, say where you're from, and let us know what you think. And remember, be kind and friendly, because that's what this is all about too. So I'd like to now introduce Melanie Hoffman, the co-founder of Drawdown Alberta and the lead mentor for Alberta with the Climate Reality Project Canada, and our host for this evening. Melanie's a PhD chemist. She's taught at the university level and is now an Eco Schools program manager with the Alberta Council for Environmental Education. She loves a good laugh, values her neighbors and the land, has deep respect for all that is local, and has an abiding curiosity for what lies beyond. And to take us to what lies beyond, I'd now like to introduce Melanie Hoffman.
Thank you so much, Rick, and happy anniversary, WaterDocs. I'm honored and humbled to be in dialogue with 3 amazing voices tonight, leaders for our future world from different generations, from different backgrounds, and from different places in the world coming together in conversation for regeneration, ending the climate crisis in one generation. I'm joining tonight from Treaty 6 territory in Amisquachi, Waskahigan, which is Cree for Beaver Hills House, also known as Edmonton, Alberta. In our conversation tonight, Paul and I will unpack how it is that we will end the climate crisis in one generation. That shouldn't take us too long, so pretty quickly we'll move on, and I will invite 2 leading community voices, Allie Rougeot and Bryanna Brown, to join a roundtable conversation with Paul. We as Drawdown community groups are committed to building a movement, and we're excited to be coming together across the country tonight. Our aim is for everyone to know that the solutions exist and that what we need is courageous and thoughtful implementation that serves life over profit. I'm excited to start this conversation with someone who is himself a deep thinker and entrepreneur, someone who intricately understands capitalism and commerce. Paul founded Project Drawdown, which brought together over 200 scientists and scholars to develop the Drawdown framework to map, measure, and model the 100 existing solutions that can cumulatively reverse global warming. What does drawdown mean in this context? Drawdown is the point in time when greenhouse gases in the atmosphere peak and begin to decline on a year-to-year basis. It means flattening the emissions curve, language that we are all too familiar with these days. Relying completely on currently available technology and approaches, Project Drawdown models reaching this goal through three basic pillars. Firstly, reducing emissions. Secondly, supporting nature as carbon sinks. And thirdly, improving society. Paul flipped the narrative for many of us working in the climate movement in his first line in the Drawdown book when he writes, "The genesis for Project Drawdown was curiosity, not fear." It's not that we're not in a crisis, it's that our focus can go to and needs to go to how we move forward together today. And Paul's new book, Regeneration, centers what was already an important thread in Drawdown: nature, earth, and Indigenous connection. In our Drawdown communities, we recognize the importance of listening to and highlighting Indigenous voices because they have been the successful stewards of the land for time immemorial. Paul talks about regeneration in two ways. It refers to regenerating life on Earth, and it refers to a new generation of humanity coming together to reverse global warming. As such, regeneration strikes a new note of possibility for action at the personal, community, and systemic level. Paul Hawken starts ecological businesses, writes about nature and commerce, and consults with heads of states and CEOs on climatic, economic, and ecological regeneration. The year I was born, Esquire magazine named Paul one of the best 100 people of a generation. But he didn't stop there. He's the founder of Regeneration.org, which stands on the shoulders of his New York Times best-selling book, Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. Paul is published in 30 languages, and his books are available in over 90 countries. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Paul Hawken.
Wow.
Hi, Paul.
Thank you. That's one of the best introductions I've ever heard. I come to you from the unceded lands of the coast of Miwok that are almost completely disappeared, frankly, unfortunately, due to the missions that came here from the Spanish. But it is a beautiful, beautiful land with beautiful traditions. I want to just express my gratitude for where I live and those who've come before me. So thank you. And thank you for the introduction. It was really good. I mean, I'm not saying because it was about me, but I'm just saying, oh, you got a lot of facts right there. And it's like, wow, she's done her homework.
Thank you.
and Drawdown and Regeneration is about homework, actually doing the homework. And just to go leaping ahead, the book Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation has 7,262 citations. And as we used to say, in God we trust, all others bring data. So it's actually got a very firm foundation as opposed to being speculative or fantasy or, some like Holly Golightly kind of thing. Oh, we can, end the climate crisis. Melanie, what I meant by ending the climate crisis is that by 2030, 35, we are going in the right direction at the right rate. And the crisis is that we're not. And so it isn't as though we have, so many years and then we're done with it. This is hopefully, and regeneration is the direction of society forever. That we've went through our degeneration phase. We're in it now, hugely. Every economic sector, whether it's a service or product, is degenerative. If you go just not very far down the supply chain, you will find that everything we buy, sell, make, take, receive, takes life, harms life. And that's degeneration. And the reason I use the word regeneration is not only because it's the only way to go forward that can actually reverse not only global warming, but the sixth extinction and so many other impacts that we're experiencing today, is because it's actually innate to being a human being. I chose the word drawdown because I took it from the climate literature. And it is kind of a negative term, draw down your checking account, draw down your well, draw down troops, and I actually, right to the end, I debated whether to use the term or not, but I thought maybe using it in this context, it could have a stipulative meaning and a sensibility for people. And I think you've done that so well in Canada, and the way you describe Drawdown Alberta and the other organizations that are here today. But the reason I chose Regeneration, and just so you know, from my point of view, Drawdown's a prequel to Regeneration. I knew I was going to write Regeneration when I hadn't finished writing Drawdown. And so it was always where I was going and so forth, as opposed to being an add-on. It's not an add-on whatsoever. And the main difference is that, as you know, I think Drawdown really started in my mind in 2001, and that started at the third assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And as everyone who does read it, I read the summary. No one reads the whole thing. I can't find anybody who's read a whole one except copy editors. It's 4,000 pages, it's just,
Yep.
Yep.
I'm familiar with the document, haven't read it.
You tried. Yeah. But it was more pessimistic than the second, which is more pessimistic than the first, more dire, this and that. And of course, as then, not so much now, but certainly then it was talked about, this is a consensus science, from, the 2,500 scientists, organized by the UN Framework on Climate Change. And there's no such thing as consensus science. Science is evident.
Thank you. Yep. Yep.
Yes, as a scientist, you can appreciate that. And so that term really was basically, a stalking horse, or just, for saying, well, it was politicized science. And that's different than being consensus science. And the science has been politicized virtually every assessment, although the sixth assessment does seem really interesting to me in that respect. But going back to the third assessment, that was in the same year that we had 9/11, and which was definitely a moment in time where you just knew everything was going to be different, but you didn't know how, and you didn't even know why. In some sense, approximately you did, but overall it wasn't clear. And I began to think about who I was, what did I want to do for the rest of my life. And I decided that the only criteria that I could use was I wanted to be helpful. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a world-class journalist. I'm not a this. The list I'm not of is really long. And
that's reassuring after reading your bio and seeing like the lists of what you are. So a good reminder for all of us that the list of what we're not is long.
We'll talk about self-image later, but the point being is that I just want to be helpful. So what could be helpful? And at that time, looking at the third assessment, I thought, well, do we know what to do? I really, in fact, I knew we didn't, by the way. I mean, you could Google then, but I mean, it's like there just wasn't any vetted list of the solutions, and we hadn't named the goal. We were then and now talking about fighting, tackling, combating, mitigating. Those aren't goals, those are verbs. And I wanted to find out. I wanted to know, could we do it? Do we have the solutions at hand, the exit ones, the ones we know how to do right now? And if we scale them, could we get to net zero in 2050, which is what people were talking about then in 2001. And that was the origin of Drawdown. And I asked other organizations to do it, NGOs, institutions, colleges, friends. Everybody said it was a good idea, but they all said they didn't do it. They didn't know how to do it. They weren't funded to do it, etc. And after 2-3 years, I just forgot about it. I didn't forget, but I forgot. I stopped asking because nobody was interested. But I just thought, well, we need it more and more and more as time went on, not less and less. And so in 2013 is when Amanda Joy Ravenhill, and I were sitting in the backyard, and we were teaching this course at the Presidio.
Sorry, where were you teaching the course?
At the Presidio College. Presidio is a business, a green business school, and we're teaching a course together. And I talked about doing another book that would actually make waves. And she said, like what? I said, well, the Ecology of Commerce, because environmentalists hated it and the business people hated it. I thought, that's a good book. They each thought the other was the problem, and so that was published in 93. And I said, I want to do something that would, make a difference. And then I came up with the idea of Drawdown. I'd already had it, but let's do Drawdown. And then Chad Frischman and later Crystal Chazelle, we joined together, and we didn't know how to do it either. That's the most important thing. And so out it came, and you described how it did come. Regeneration, though, is different in the sense that Drawdown was very much stayed in its lane: map, model, and measure. The 100 most substantive solutions to reversing global warming. Great. And regeneration is how to get them done. Because the what is not the how. You can say, hold up a shiny object. You say, like a phone, an iPhone or something. Like, here's a shiny object. How do you use it? And how do you implement it? How do you do it? And that opens up a vast landscape of connections. And regeneration as a word is, people may not use the word, but they act it out every second in their life. And all 30 trillion cells in your body are regenerating right now, and now, and now, and now, and everybody else is listening. And so we are a walking, talking protoplasm full of regeneration. That's what we are. But it goes deeper than that. It goes into our emotions, how we care, how we take care of others, our children, our family, our neighbors, our friends, our environment, water, for goodness sakes, of all things. I mean, and so this is who we are. All caring is regeneration. That is what it does. And so the first line of the book is regeneration is putting life at the center of every act and decision. And that's innate to life itself. That's what life does. It creates the conditions for more life. And I felt like the climate conversation right up through COP that just ended Sunday, the Conference of the Parties, is still so much about stopping, so much about, probabilities of what's going to go wrong. If we don't do this, more things are going to go wrong. That's pretty good science, actually. I don't argue that. But it's not a narrative that gets people going. It really isn't, and here's the danger. And if you don't do this, we're going to be screwed. It's good science and bad neurology. In other words, it's terms of communication. And human beings, as we know, move towards possibility and not the probability of what's going to go wrong. And so regeneration is very much about that. And the most important about regeneration is the website, not the book. And the website has Nexus, which is the world's largest listing of climate solutions and how to get them done.
It's like you've done this before, Paul, and you know exactly what I'm going to ask you. So thank you for already giving so much of an overview of where these pieces have come from, how long the genesis of the project really was, and what goes into this, right? As we're all working on trying to be helpful and figuring out how we can be helpful in this issue and exploring how to contribute. So it's really encouraging to hear about that path, and to hear that with regeneration, your aim is exactly that, to help groups like ours who are looking at Drawdown as this wonderful collection of currently available solutions and are going, and now what? And how do we make it happen? So can you tell us a little bit more about the website and about Nexus and how Regeneration is here to help us implement solutions?
Well, first of all, you're doing exactly the right thing. You're communities. So Drawdown Alberta is a community of people. All of nature is community. Hello. And so one thing
not
I'm
all
sure
competition, Paul?
Huh?
It's not all competition?
Not out there. No, it's not. And Suzanne Simard's my hero from British Columbia, who basically against the beliefs, the paradigmatic beliefs of her male counterparts, went ahead and did the science, about the mother trees and seeing trees as a community, as as intelligent organisms instead of phototropically competing for light, and trying with sharp tree elbows, whatever those are. But I mean, we know now so much about nature that we didn't know 5, 10, 15 years ago. And it's reversing a lot of the perceptions of nature that were laid on top of it by, with all due respect to my gender, men, and not all due respect, but some due respect, okay? Because
that's fair, yeah.
Well, just like climate, combat, tackle, and fight, what is that? Those are war and sports metaphors, they did not come from women. I'm pretty sure that, and so the same thing holds true with Nexus. And Nexus is about agency, which is that what you've done is create agency. We're not an individual. We have networks, not our family and friends only, but our communities, our churches, our synagogues, our mosques, our temples, our classes, our cities, our companies, our clubs, I mean, it goes on and on. And these are our networks, and this is where we can be most effective. All solutions to reversing global warming are local, regional. They're not going to happen in a capital city. They're not going to happen in a Congress, in a parliament. They can help for sure if they ever figure it out, but that's not where it happens. It happens where we are, what we do, what we make, how we make it, how we farm, how we eat, what choices we make, how we work together, what do we do in terms of, exchanging, trading, how we create our energy, et cetera, et cetera. All this, but so you're right at the core of those solutions, in solving it, as opposed to an add-on, and so I just think that individuation, this is what you can do, like Uncle Sam maybe, or something, pointing at you like, okay, what can I do, and eat less meat and recycle your plastic, and you go, I will. But you kind of know that isn't enough, and then people still to this day, and you saw it in the Conference of the Parties, people look to the massive UNFCCC, the meeting in the capital city, and in a year in which definitely it was a year of inflection for a lot of people, and it was a year 2021 and 20 for that matter, but it was a year in which the climate crisis became experiential, not for everybody, but for a lot more people, and said no longer concept, and if it wasn't vicariously experiential, it was directly. And so there was a lot of anticipation about the Conference of the Party, because there was that sense, a heightened sense of anxiety, of fear, of threat, et cetera, all that sort of stuff. But no matter what happens there, it's those are employees in the blue zone inside there. They're delegates and ministers and heads of corporations, and they are paid to represent the self-interest of their organization or their country, and those self-interests are conflicting. And so that's what's so beautiful about community, is that what unites you is more important than what divides you.
Yeah, and so that I think is a really great place to dig a little bit deeper. One of our conversation partners that is joining us, Bryanna, was at COP herself, so that might be something for you two to dig into a little more. But what I'm curious about is, having that awareness of solutions needing to be implemented and being most powerfully implemented at the local and regional level, and yet we're held up in these global negotiations, in these transnational corporations that contribute a lot into issues such as the military industry and these big pieces that feel so far away from ourselves. How does Nexus and Regeneration empower the individual to step into these circles and take on more responsibility than recycling?
Yeah. And so Nexus is the how-to. You open it up. I would open up now. If you did a screen share, I could show you. But basically, it starts, here's the call to action. Like, look, you're Alberta. There's challenges in Nexus too, by the way, challenges and solutions. Challenges
and I'd like to talk a little more about those, absolutely.
Yeah, the boreal is the challenge, I mean, of course, it's a solution if you stop, ruining it and destroying it. But I mean, basically, it's a challenge to get that stopped, okay? And anyway, it says, here's the call to action. Here's what we're talking about. Very short, like a simple paragraph. And then it starts, this is what you can do as an individual, as a single individual. Okay. And then it goes, this is what you can do as a group, as a school, as a class, as a company, as a village, as a town, as a city. In all these are at different levels of agency. These are the effective actions you can take and so forth. And these are the bad actors. So, these, like in the boreal, we talk about Procter & Gamble making plush toilet paper out of the boreal forest. We say, here's the name of the CEO and here is his email and here's his phone number. And I'm sure he'd like to hear from you regarding Charmin toilet paper. And then there's not too many bad actors, but we don't want to, delve in that. But then we have all the good actors, in the case of the boreal, it's a big list of Indigenous cultures, First Nations, and what they're doing and what they know and science there too, and then NGOs that are really doing amazing work in the boreal. And then we have videos you can see, documentaries you can see. Here's the great articles that are out there. Here's the great books. In other words, you want to do something about the boreal, here you go. This gives you so many options, so many ways to learn more, so many ways to connect to the people, organizations that are doing something, connect to the ones who are not helping at all, with respect to this extraordinarily, the biggest source of carbon on the planet is the boreal. A terrestrial system is source of sink of carbon is the boreal forest. And so each solution and challenge has this, and then we now are getting curated by our people. Go on and say, what about this? Did you know about that? And somebody about food apartheid, said, these are the black food companies, put them on. Great. Okay. I mean, so it's a growing, constant, evolving a set of basically resources for everybody, and there's two ways to look at it. One is I know how to do this. I want to do it better. But the other thing is to look at the 130 solutions and challenges. The thing that's going to happen is you can look at something and say, I've always wanted to do that, but I didn't know how to do it, or can I do that? And so it could be just curiosity, which you talked about earlier, just I've always been curious about this. So it also is an entry point for you to become more literate, more educated, more connected, more aware, more informed about a specific solution or challenge. And whether it's an individual or whether it's a church or whether it's a school or whether it's a company, etc. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And so just to pull out one highlight there that I want to make sure doesn't get lost is, did you say the boreal is the largest carbon sink?
Yeah.
So that might be an important piece for us to take note as Canada, because I don't know that is so much part of public awareness.
Yeah, no, number one. Of course, the boreal goes to the taiga, it goes to Scandinavia and Alaska,
right.
but
So around the Arctic Circle.
yeah. But I mean, yeah, it's a larger carbon sink on
Mm.
on terrestrial systems by far, by far. There's no
So a
second.
big question to us for how we deal with the resources that we are have kinship with. And then you spoke to in the role of Indigenous leadership in conservation and the role of Indigenous knowledge in these pieces. You write about degeneration and the impact that it has had, and you spoke to it already today. Can you expand a little more on how you phrase social justice as not being a sideshow to the emergency?
I say it's the cause, it's not the sideshow. It's the cause. It's the original cause. And
so that's pretty juicy, because I thought as a scientist, the cause was carbon emissions.
Yeah, and that's a big mistake. Because yeah, well, let me clarify that. And we have to swap out our energy systems. We have to stop burning coal, gas, and oil. Forests too, by the way, on trees. But we have to stop burning coal, gas, and oil. No question about it. I mean, it's 80% of global CO2 emissions, and we have to cease doing that. But the focus has been on carbon dioxide. Okay. Where is it coming from? We know where it's coming from. Okay. To what end? What is that what is that combustion for? Mm-hmm. What are we doing with that energy? It's a lot of it. And what we're doing is we're destroying cultures, places, the living world, oceans. I mean, so you can destroy the world with renewable energy too, you know.
Thank you. That is an important point to mention in this context.
It definitely is. You can screw over indigenous cultures in the Amazon with a renewably powered chainsaw. You know, to have more soybeans for JBS to sell more meat to people who are clueless. So we have to open this up, and renewable energy is extremely important. I mean, it's without which there is no drawdown. Okay, no question about that. So I'm not in any way saying, well, you know, that's not so important. This is more important. No, you know, where we say we have to look at it with in a systemic way, look at it the whole and say, what are we doing here with all this energy? And what you're seeing actually is, you know, basically corporations committing to net zero by 2040, 2045, 2050, using offsets, you know, which if you total them all up, there isn't enough offsets on this planet for what they're counting on. But especially since only 5% of the offsets today actually sequester carbon, the other 95% don't.
In the future?
They protect, and their additionality, they do not sequester carbon. So, but the point being is that, okay, they want to offset their emissions, but offsetting a loss is not a gain. And so what we're talking about here is like, I take $20 from you. You go, where's my $20? And then tomorrow I give you the $20 back. You haven't gained anything. And this is what we're talking about. This is really bad math. And so what we're talking about is a degenerative economic system that is taking life. And what regeneration is about, can we do a 180 there, please? And can we make and do the things we need and share and rely upon in a way that creates more life? And for example, that's exactly what regenerative agriculture does. It creates more life. Industrial agriculture destroys life, okay? So, I mean, I can go on to the different sectors and so forth, but it's regenerative or it's degenerative. There is no middle ground there. There's no neutral, like, oh, I'm thinking about it. I mean, you're doing one or the other. And the idea and that somehow if we forsake our degenerative economic, capitalist, neoliberal, you know, extractive economy, that we'll all be poor, we won't have jobs, you know, and things will go to hell, is actually upside down and backwards. That is the way to hell. Keep going there. That road doesn't end very much further. We can see it now. And so we know from other examples, again, regen ag being, one of the main ones, because food and ag together are 35% of global emissions. So, I mean, it's a really, really important one. And the cause of deforestation and many other things that aren't related to that 35%. But the point being is that either we are going to continue to steal the future or going to heal it. And healing is what life does. And we are life, and we can do that. And we're bright, and we're imaginative, and we care. And there's examples, and the WaterDocs showed examples, of people who just are using their skill, their heart, their soul, their intelligence, their brilliance, and their organizing capacity to do that. And we can do the same about creating a culture, a basis, an economy that's actually about healing the future. That is to say, being a keystone species like a beaver or a wolf or a bee or a hummingbird. And what they do is create more life the way they live. We can create a way of living. We know how to do it. It creates more life. That's regeneration.
Yeah, and this is something that speaks really deeply to my heart and my vision for the future. But then I recognize that in the system in which we operate currently, right, we have these quarterly business focuses. We have pretty short horizons on which people are planning. I hear from friends that, even for farmers in the current system, they're not investing into things that have payback a few years down the line. How do you address that through the framework of regeneration?
The same way you're addressing it in Alberta. The thing is that the going back to farmers listen to farmers. That's who they listen to, and that's who they learn from. And there is an initial pioneering group of farmers, some go way back even to World War II, but I mean, that's growing and expanding everywhere because it works better. And at first, they were made fun of. Other farmers felt threatened by them. The farm looked like shit, because it was, cover crops, but they called them weeds. You have weeds all over your land. Where's the soil? You're not using glyphosate. And farmers worldwide are hitting the wall in terms of debt, highest rate of suicide. Are farmers, right, in the world? I mean, why are they committing suicide? Because they're losing their third, fourth, fifth generation farm. The shame of that all. I mean, it's really terrible. And that's because industrial ag basically is, as I said, degenerative, and you can see the end of that road. When you turn soil into dirt, soil is a community, and go back to community. And so the way you do it is to create the conditions for self-organization. That was your question. How do you do it? You don't. You create the conditions for people to come to an understanding. I did it in the book in this way. Okay, I could say at the beginning of the book, hey, listen up, it's all connected, which is such a very true cliche. Okay. Thank you for sharing, it's like, or I could do what I did in the book, which is in those sectors in fire ecology and wilding, in different sections, make connections that somebody might not have known about. Like, who knew? Oh, isn't that fascinating? How curious. That connects to that? Wow. And so they then can read the book and go, at some point, wow, it's all connected. Okay, so you're creating the conditions for them to change their own mind, because you cannot change other people's minds. And everybody knows that, because we have a hard time changing our own mind. And so if you can't change your own mind easily, just think of what it is to change others. It doesn't work. But what does work is to create those conditions, that opening, that spaciousness for people. And that is, and I say in the book, the fundamental cause is not just injustice. Another way to look at the cause of global warming is the profound disconnection between people, between each other, between us and nature. and between nature itself, the habitat fragmentation, the acidification, the poisoning, the deforestation. We've disconnected nature from itself. And the way you heal a system, an ecosystem, immune system, a social system, whatever it is to connect more of it to itself. We know that. That's pure science. And so that's what you're doing. That's what Drawdown does. That's what we do when we organize.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful, and exactly what what brings us all into this, the desire to connect, the recognition of the importance of connection. And then you've painted a little bit of that picture already of what this regenerative world looks like, and you've spoken to the importance of what a friend of mine talks about as sort of the myths that we're missing these days, where we don't have a vision of what it is that we're moving toward, right. Where we're so focused on what we're trying to avoid, that we're not moving toward what it is that we're imagining to go to. And so someone brought the idea of Solarpunk to me recently. Is that a movement that you're familiar with at all, Paul?
Vaguely, I love it. Yeah, but not enough to be very intelligent about it. You can share if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm exploring it also, and so I was, curious to hear what thoughts you have around commonalities and differences between Solarpunk and regeneration, because always I'm looking for those connections and looking for how do we work together and not at odds. And so looking at Solarpunk as this artful movement towards imagining what a good future can look like, and how we make this inclusive and speak to many different voices. So yeah, I'm very excited to think that through more and engage with it more. At this point then, recognizing that we need leadership from people who don't have a seat at the table and who don't have a vested interest in the current system prevailing, people who are able to imagine something very different to what we have now. I want to open up the conversation and invite our two wonderful conversation partners, Allie and Bryanna, to join into the conversation. So we're going to switch into a bit of a roundtable now, where we'll aim to remain grounded in curiosity and to have Allie, Bryanna, and Paul dig more deeply into regeneration together. To kick us off, I'd like to ask both of you, Bryanna and Allie, to introduce yourselves and share how our conversation tonight is sitting with you thus far, how what Paul has shared resonates, and your thoughts on regeneration. Paul, I'm sure you'll have your own questions for Allie and Bryanna, so I'll mostly sit back and let the three of you take it from here for the next half hour or so. So Bryanna, if you want to kick us off and tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Hi, how's it going? My name is Bryanna. Itili hi, Bryanna Avunga Hanuivi. So I just said hi, my name is Bryanna again. How are you? I hope you're well. I would like to thank my ancestors, because their love and resilience is the reason I'm here today. I really like what you are speaking of so far, because a lot of the time I think of capitalism and individualism and how that's affecting the climate right now versus having more of a relationship with each other and togetherness. I am Inuk and Mi'kmaq from Nunatsiavut, Labrador, and I am on the Indigenous Climate Action Steering Committee, as well as the Indigenous Climate Action Climate Policy Advisory Council. And that is the reason that I went to COP26 for the previous 2 weeks. I just got back on the 12th. So I'm a little bit jet lagged, I apologize. I also work in anti-human trafficking part-time. I will do presentations for various organizations across Turtle Island, also known as North America. And I also work with the Climate Justice Organizing Hub, which is a organization based in Montreal. And it's an organization set up to support activists and Indigenous rights. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate being on a panel with such lovely people. And it's really great to meet all of you. And I just wanted to say, Paul, that I can see in your eye movement that you think so much. And I think that you asked the question, why, just to so many things. So I was wondering, just maybe what drove you to be interested in climate change in the first place? And is it something that you've always been passionate about? Have you always seen things this way, or was it over time and through research that you've thought of having Drawdown?
Thank you so much. I would love to know so much about your culture and where you're from and everything. I mentioned that because I had the opportunity of spending a few hours with a Yupik woman not so long ago, and I was just blown away by, we don't have to go into it now, but she was saying in a very humble way, just so soft, how, they could predict weather 2 years in advance, and accurately. And I was like gobsmacked, so, well, we have all these satellites up there and we can't do it 6 days in advance. And so and she spent like a half hour describing in minutia what I call observational science, which is really the hallmark of Indigenous cultures everywhere, which is exactly noticing everything in their environment, the color of the ice when it froze, not just did it freeze, when did it freeze, etc. The different types of snow and when they fell, the felt on the caribou antlers, it just went on and on and on. And they had a way of correlating 2 years, back, because they had great hippocampuses, amazing memories, which is, and they could remember exactly what was going on 2 years ago. And they used pattern recognition to basically predict weather, and so to me, I've always wanted to write a book called Indigene, not to describe Indigenous cultures, that's for them to do, I'm a white boy, but could actually to just these stories and say, do you have any idea, about the gorgeous, the beauty, the brilliance of the science that we ran roughshod over, we being the Europeans, colonists, so-called colonists. We were worse than colonizers, and so forth. And that exists today. And I just want to acknowledge that beyond. Thank you. My work with the environment started when I was a lad, when I was a young boy, very young. And in my home, it was unsafe. It was not a safe place to be as a boy. And so I would go outside every single moment I could. And when I was outside, I didn't know what was going on, but I felt safe. I felt safe. I felt held. I felt enclosed. And inside it wasn't safe. And you can master the inside of a home in if you're 4 years old, it takes about 40 minutes. Light switch, bathroom, refrigerator. We didn't have a TV, but if we had one, we're on and off. That was kind of it, Outside, you don't know what's going on, the names of things, the sounds, the smells, is it edible? You pick up a rock and things go this way. Just in the water, there was, a wetland there, I used to spend so much time in that wetland, and, putting pollywogs in jars and, watching the feet come out and all. So for me, what it developed is curiosity. That's what I want to get to. And that goes to that first sentence, which is, I just became curious, and that's what journalism properly should be, which is, I don't know, and I would like to know. And so you ask questions, or you read, or listen. And so I was involved with the environment since I was 20 years old. And what I did on climate is I just assumed that the Jim Hansen, the Bill McKibbins, and, the Michael Manns, and they're old men at that time. They weren't the Catherine Hales and the other, and we're on it. They're the experts. They wrote the end of Nature, Bill's book, brilliant book. Al Gore also wrote a brilliant book on climate. And I just felt somehow that thing was taken care of over there until 2000. And that's, I told you that story already. And so that's when I became interested in it as an so-called environmentalist, you know. So I plunged into the literature, plunged into everything. And I just asked that simple question, you know, what can we do? It seemed like so strange that after it'd been in the public sphere for 30, 40 years, you know, climate, and no one had a list of what to do. And I just thought, oh, you're kidding. You gotta be kidding. And, you know, it's just like, to this day, anthropologically, I find that so fascinating. And so that's how it came about. And of course, anything you do with the living world is just going to pull you in deeper and deeper and deeper, because it's mysterious and fascinating and complex and beautiful and extraordinary. And you, just like a 4-year-old, you realize how much you don't know. You learn more to learn how much more you don't know, as opposed to, now I got this one, you know, you don't have it ever. And that's, again, what I am so profoundly appreciative on Indigenous culture, is that humility in its relations. You know, it's not domination. And just to be on the record, 30% of my board are Indigenous people, and 70% women, and 20% African American, and so forth. To me, if you don't have the world that you're serving and that you're inside, and it's not really inside, but you're inside the organization, then you're not serious, you know. And so, and the ED is Canadian, by the way, Asian Canadian, and the 2 co-chairs are also women. So it took me a long time to figure this out, but I got it this time. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Paul. Allie, would you like to join the conversation and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks very much. Bryanna, were you going to answer something shortly? Thank you.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate that response.
Sounds good. Sure. Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. My name is Aliénor, or Ali, if it's easier. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm a climate justice activist. I've been involved in some sort of advocacy since I was very young, first because I heard about biodiversity loss and thought that it was pretty impossible to allow, you know, the big, beautiful animals that fascinated me to go extinct. So that's what kind of led me there. And then I started getting involved in human rights. And again, I thought it's pretty impossible that we're letting, I lived in south of France, so that we're letting refugees come to our shores and that we're not treating them with the dignity that we would want for ourselves. And obviously, when you're in those movements, eventually you come to learn about the climate crisis and how that's going to affect people and biodiversity and everything else. And so very gradually, I got involved in the work of climate justice, and it took over my life the past 3 years when I founded or co-founded actually the Fridays for Future Toronto chapter. And so Fridays for Future, for those of you that haven't heard of it yet, is the youth climate strike movement that started about 3 years ago, and since then has really, I think, gained a lot of momentum. So that's how I got involved. At the same time, I was studying economics and public policy at the University of Toronto, so informing a lot of my worldview and informing a lot of my activism. And now I still work in the youth climate space. I still consider myself youth, but at the same time, I'm now working in a nonprofit called Environmental Defense, where I'm really trying to think about the transition for workers and for communities as we transition to a decarbonized economy. How do we plan for them and with them? Actually, how do they plan, and how do we support them in that role? So that's kind of my background. And if you're open to it, I'd love to kind of give you my initial reaction as I was listening to the conversation and looking through the Regeneration book, because it spoke to me a lot, this idea of regeneration, because I'm very frustrated with the term sustainability. It implies that you want to sustain the world that we are in right now. And when you understand that we're not only in a climate crisis, but also really in a racial justice crisis, and in so many sets of crises that I don't want to list now, you understand that there's no point in sustaining this, and we really do have to heal together and regenerate, actually, and all get to something better and more just. So I really like the idea of regeneration. I had heard of it in an economic context, but much less in the idea of it actually being applicable to all other spheres, whether it's agriculture, whether it's just the ways we govern. So I thought that was a very interesting opening for me. And I think it actually corresponds quite a bit to the way the youth climate movement has been thinking, even though we didn't maybe articulate it so well. But it seems like we've kind of gotten out of the usual silos of environmentalism, where the issue is carbon, and the solution is how do you not have the carbon. And it seems like we've been able, as much as possible, to kind of go to the root and actually dare say the words colonialism and capitalism and white supremacy. And I think we've been able to say it a little more. And so again, I really saw a parallel between how it was laid out in your book and how we've been trying to articulate it. Our most recent protest was saying uproot the system, which was, take it out by its roots. And I think that's also what you were getting at. I also thought that it was a positive way to frame it. And I hope that now in my conversations with youth, because now I like to go and meet younger youth and kind of work with them to empower them. I hope I can bring those ideas, because the feelings that we have of anger or fear, they do fuel us quite a bit, I think, as young people, but they can only fuel you for so long, because then they just kind of take over you, and it becomes more frustrating or difficult than anything else. And so being able to paint the what we're going towards is a really powerful tool that I think you've kind of equipped us with, is what are we going to, what are we fighting for, more than what are we fighting against. And given how emotional this whole work is, and I'm sure, Bryanna, you've felt it tremendously more than I have, how emotional this work is, it feels good to say that we might also be allowed to regenerate ourselves as we build a future, and we're not just going to be, even if we're successful, I don't want us to be successful in fighting the climate crisis, but all exhausted and completely disgusted, even if in a safe world. So that really spoke to me, and I hope that's something I can bring in when I speak to youth. And finally, something else that came to mind was, however, not wanting to shame anyone, and maybe especially not wanting to shame the youth for feeling a lot of the uglier feelings. Because what I found when we talk about regeneration, actually, when we talk with a few adult allies, they tend to tell us that fact about neuroscience and psychology. And I did also take a few courses, so I was also told that negative emotions won't really, drive people. They will actually freeze people. And I think that's true. And I think that's something we should know. And at the same time, I think we need to really carve out a space for young people, and also all people that are affected by the current system, to allow them to point fingers for a bit and allow them to be really angry for a bit, because this is a very angering situation. I think a lot of us, I've had conversations with a lot of young women who feel like me, we've lost control over, for example, whether we'll be able to be mothers, not because our bodies are controlled anymore, but just because the space that we would welcome a child in is no longer safe. And so things like that are obviously very emotional. And sometimes we want to point fingers and be angry and kind of tell other generations, how could you put us in this mess? And so hopefully we can, at the same time, equip people with the best ways to get to a climate just future, and at the same time say, but it's okay when you feel those ugly emotions. They shouldn't be the whole story. You're not going to get anyone on board, but they're allowed to be there. So I'm really, really honored to be in conversation with you, Paul, and with you, Bryanna. I think after the COP that we had, which I wasn't present, but I was following closely from afar, after so many talks about 2050 and net zero and a lot of buzzwords, it's good to talk about tangible solutions and real people doing real things. So I really appreciate that. And I'll have a few more questions afterwards about mostly economics and community agency. But for now, I just, pass back the virtual mic to you, Paul, and to Bryanna.
Wow. I totally agree with you. Going to emotions, I look at it two ways. One is that the origin of, go back, 45 years or more, and what climate scientists was talking about is future existential threat. Okay, that term is still being used. To me, it's no longer future existential threat, but that's another. And threat creates fear. And so that was the communication modality, from the climate world. And then activists picked it up, and they use shame, blame, and guilt, though. And they used it as a way to try to motivate people. And what I want to say is feeling that within yourself is different than having somebody try to motivate you by making you feel blamed or guilty, or if you don't do this, so forth. That's, because to me, those emotions are not ugly at all. They're really important. And they're there for a reason. And anger, first of all, is, for many people, it's the first way they can tell a truth. It'll come out as anger, but it comes out finally, in Fridays for the Future. I mean, like the call outs, it's colonization, neoliberal, capitalism. I mean, those are kind words actually for what it is, from my point of view. It's much worse than that. And there should be anger, and stress is really important. And stress is telling us to act. That's what stress is for. We're Homo sapiens. We've had stress for a long, long time. It's an important emotion. And I feel like that I guess what I want to say is that, you've seen the polls, I'm sure, Eleanor, but I mean the polls of, the 16 to 24 cohort, or whatever you want to call that, the polls all over the world say very similar things, which is 70% our youth, whatever you want to call that cohort, are anxious, are panicked. 39-40% of them are having that same thing. Well, do I want to bring a child into this into this world? What an interesting dilemma that is, as a woman. I mean, just to have to think about that and hold that, and when I've spoken to that cohort, and I've said, that's absolutely right. You should feel anxious. That is, I'm wondering what are the other 30% feeling? I mean, it's like, come on, what are they reading? And so to me, the art of all this is not to deny the probabilities, not to deny culpability, responsibility. And that's what I said in Nexus. We have the bad actors. Hey, this is who they are. Here's a phone number. Here's an email. And, boom, 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 and all these different areas, and so you worry about deforestation in the Amazon. Here's the CEO of JBS, the biggest meat company in the world. Okay. And what you can do, you go to school, ask the school to stop buying from JBS until they're committed to not, there's all sorts of ways, and this is called influence, but it's called also taking your anger and your outrage and that sense of violation, because it is a violating acts we're talking about, violate people, places, tribes, cultures, nations, animals, everything. But at the same time, sort of in the Wendell Berry quote, be joyous though you've considered all the facts. So it's like saying, this science rocks. I mean, it is incredible. And it's hard to take in, and not just in terms of fear, but in terms of grief. I mean, what you said about as a woman, like child, no child, you know, I mean, that's a choice always, but I don't want that chosen for me by externalities, you know. That is that's grief, you know. I mean, and the grief is so important. That being said, I do think to succeed, the climate movement, whatever that amorphous phrase means, whatever, has to be the joyous expression of purpose. And they seem contradictory, but they're not. And because that's what brings us together. And we've got to come together. And it's the only way humans do, you know, to celebrate, to sing, ritual, dance, art, you know, laughter, you know, I mean, that's what brings us together, you know. And so I think with regeneration, my hope is that it is about, you know, the wonder of what is possible, whether it's in a city, whether it's in a company, whether it's in a forest, whether it's in a farm, whether it's in a mangrove, whether it's in a tribal culture, you know, like the Ashwar or something like that, wherever. It's about really the possibilities that are there now. And the way I see it, and, you know, slap me down if you think I'm wrong, I see we're being homeschooled by Mother Earth. We're being homeschooled. This is our home. We're being homeschooled. And so this is all feedback from the mother. And any system that ignores feedback perishes. And so feedback actually is a kindness. It's not a blame. It's not a curse. It's a kindness. If you get a fever, your body is being kind to itself. You know, it's dealing with something, right? Infection, bacteria, whatever. And so, and the second part of that is that, you know, we talk about the language, the way we've languaged it has made it separate in a way, because we're fighting climate change, we're combating whatever. And so we're othering it. Well, wait a minute. Othering is the mindset that caused the problem. Okay, we othered Indigenous people, we othered land, we othered oceans, we othered creatures, we othered gender, religions. I mean, this is the most othering time of human history. And we think that if we other it, first of all, there's no it out there. You know, Bill Gates says, well, we can fix it. Oh, really? I want him to show me the it. Because he's completely separated from the biosphere. Completely. And the atmosphere is just the gaseous expression of the biosphere. It's not like, there's atmosphere there and over there is the biosphere. No. And so to me, it's like looking at that homeschooling, saying nature never makes a mistake. Ever. Can't. We do. So we know where to go. We know what to look at. We know how to have the conversation, as opposed to, we're going to fight it, we're going to beat it, we're going to combat it, it's like, it just drives me crazy. It's in, you know, that language, because it is going the opposite direction than where we want to go, which is the climate is supposed to change every second. If it didn't change, we wouldn't have glaciers, rivers, oceans, honeybees, and hummingbirds, and food. It's because of climate change, you know. And so the climate as it is right now is perfect. People, what do you mean it's perfect? It's this and that. No, it's perfect. It cannot be perfect. It has to be, because it's the expression of the biosphere. Inextricably connected, right? So once we're there, to me, once that understanding is there, then we say, okay, well, what are we going to do? To me, regeneration. And the reason indigenous cultures, the 5,000 of them that are in the world, are important and crucial right now is that, they've been in the same place for 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, all the way to 60,000 years, and we don't really know in some cases. They know where they live. They know how it works. And they know how to live like a keystone species, which is to create more life. And there's a beautiful Hindu, Omaru Ibrahim is in the book, and she's a Wodaabe Chadian pastoralist. And her mother, did something which brought a lot of derision originally, but she got her daughter educated. She provided the means for her daughter to get educated. So she's basically an expert in geospatial mapping for a pastoralist culture that goes 1,000 kilometers, over the span of a year and so forth. But she said something which was so beautiful. She said, yes, like the Onondaga and the Haudenosaunee, we think 7 generations ahead. Yes. She said, what people forget is that we actually know what happened 7 generations ago. And so she, or her culture, they're a part of this continuity. They see that, they feel it, they understand it. And so for them, the idea of breaking that continuity, right? What, become a private equity investor on Wall Street, make money? I mean, it's just insane, bizarre behavior, right? From that point of view. And it's insane. And an anathema, it's just like, so the most beautiful gift you be given is to know that you are now that person between that 7 generations past and 7 generations ahead. And that your ethics, your integrity, your actions, your mind, your heart, what you do is an expression,
I met Hindu at COP26, I think, and she said she's so cool. She had the most beautiful outfits every single day and beautiful beaded necklaces and earrings and headpieces. It was gorgeous. And she said, I remember she spoke to a reporter, I think, in front of me, and I was just overhearing what she said. And she said that if people responded to climate change the same way that we responded to COVID-19 in the past year or so, how quickly would we be able to actually improve things if we actually acted? And she kept saying that action is something that's really, really important. And I really like that because in the beginning you were saying that climate organizations or activists said that they were using descriptive verbs, and you said those aren't goals, those are verbs. And I think that also speaks to the action as well. And I really like it because it shows way more than words. And I guess, for example, if you're in a fight and someone says sorry, but they don't do anything to change it, are they really sorry? So I really, really appreciate that. And I just wanted to ask you, do you think that the self-determination and light shed upon Indigenous voices is a way to regeneration? And how do you use your power to amplify those voices? I think one example I can answer myself is me being here. So I just really want to say thank you.
Yeah, I've been, we have these Spaniards who come to Turtle Island seeking, Coronado, the treasure, that somehow there was a treasure here, incredible wealth. And unfortunately there was in Bolivia, in the silver mines, but put that aside for a minute. And I've always thought that, wow, there is a treasure here, and they just completely were clueless to it. And that treasure is this extraordinary, I call it also observational science. You can call it wisdom, because it's metaphorically married into the language and song and rituals in such a way And I just think what's so beautiful about right now, Bryanna, is that you're starting to see not only the emergence of Indigenous cultures and the voice, and I just feel like, and that was predicted by many different other cultures, the eagle and the condor, the different prophecies. But it is so beautiful to see it happening in Australia and Africa and here in Canada and in Norway and the Sami, and I mean it's all over the world. And the I just think it's important that's what I tried to do. I mean, indigeneity is right in the middle of regeneration, and I mean I could write a whole book about that, so it's not long enough, but it's like, wake up, everybody. In other words, I'm talking to non-Indigenous people here, when I say that, like, wake up, and and frankly, to the horror of the Holocaust, the genocide, and we haven't made amends. Make that really clear. And yet there is this extraordinary presence and voice and understanding, that is being offered. It's like, I can't imagine how. I have a lot of Indigenous friends. I would be so pissed off. I'd be so angry. And the generous and beautiful and comprehensive and intelligent way, like Lila June, who's on my board, for example, Dene and Cheyenne and so forth, and clarity with which she's expressing herself and her people, and the Dene is just, it's beyond anything that I've ever seen. And she and I went through a thing about crying, and it came out in California. We have a Hastings Law School at University of California, Berkeley, that's a very prestigious law school, Hastings Law School. Well, it's just been covered up. Hastings was a Supreme Court justice in California who organized the deliberate murder of Indigenous children and their parents in Mendocino County, and paid people for it. It's like, hello. And so it came out again, and it is no longer Hastings Law School, right? I mean, boom. But when I read the story, and I never knew about it, I'm a 5th generation Californian, never knew about that. And I wrote her, and I said, it brought tears to my eyes. And I'll send you both, if you give me your email, her response. If you send me your email, I'm paul@paulhawken.com. Oops, that's how many thousand people I'm talking. Anyway, paul@paulhawken.com, and I'll send you her response. It is so exquisite, so beautiful. And I just feel like, I don't know. I think how to amplify those voices is to get the heck out of the way of those voices. I mean, there is to create the space for them, to create, and get out of the way of your voice or what you think or what and all that sort of stuff, and so it's a very good question, Bryanna, a very good question. And I mean, I do see the voices being increased, but I still see a kind of a tokenism, and it's like, come on, don't do that. It's like, take this seriously, Yeah.
I wanted to just say thank you so much for having me here, because it's what you're saying is making me feel like I'm not being a part of that or tokenism, because you have a genuine understanding and care for what is going on, and I feel deeply look into the reasoning behind so many different things, and I'm kind of losing what I'm thinking about, but I think Allie wanted to answer as well. Sorry.
Thanks, Bryanna. Let us know when you think of that again. I actually wanted to build. I think that's an excellent question, and I wonder. I don't know who's watching this, what the people watching this are, but I assume they feel concerned and ready to take action, really. And so I wanted to do maybe a gentle call in to folks watching, because I'm a settler. I came from France, and I didn't know when I arrived in Canada how bad things were until I really, yeah. And Melanie, you seem to be also, no one tells us, and Canada's reputation abroad is too good for what it should be, for what it deserves, for what it's been doing and still doing to its Indigenous people. And so I think, Paul, you're right. We need to get out of the way in many times, but sometimes we need to get in the way. And I mean, in the most physical way possible, we need to get in the way of business as usual in Canada. And so if people are considering, I think, taking action on climate, using the words of regeneration and drawdown and creating community groups and things like that, I'd say if you can, that's something we've been trying to do at Fridays for Future Toronto, is allocating some part of your organizing time, if not money, but some of us run with very little money, so time and energy and physical bodies, if you feel safe doing so, to actually organizing directly for Indigenous struggles. Because I feel more and more uncomfortable seeing so many environmental folks looking at and asking Indigenous people for guidance, but without actually also being willing to say, like, as Bryanna herself has put it, like, land back first, and then we can ask for their knowledge, and then we can ask for their traditions. And so I just, I really appreciate Bryanna, that question, and I hope us here that are thinking, what do I do with this? Well, we make sure that we actually mean it, and we actively fight to have Indigenous sovereignty restored, and then I'd feel more comfortable asking for your traditions and knowledge and energies and times.
That's a really good point. Yeah, land back comes first. Stolen land, even to name it, it's stolen. We stole it. It's like, come on. I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah, I also agree. I wanted to maybe tell you more about land back. It was something that I started in 2019, and I started voicing my concerns about social justice issues and climate change with ICA back then in 2019, because of the support and decolonial Indigenous-centered framework in which they carry out all things. And I am a land and water protector. And when I began the land back movement, they had amplified this movement very heavily. And at the time, I saw on their website the COP26 in Madrid, Spain, and they had a photo of the team holding the land back poster. And because at that time I was living in a shelter, I was really sick, and I was just waiting to get a jaw surgery. I didn't really realize that the land back movement had caught on or become more of a thing, more than, I guess, the protest that it started at. So when I saw it on the website of Indigenous Climate Action, it was really profound in my knowing that the message was being heard on an international level, but also a spiritual level. And Indigenous Climate Action has given me the opportunity to heal very much by taking on speaking opportunities where I can tell stories, which helps me to reconnect culturally. And so one story I have for you is that I was so surprised that I saw the ICA team with a land back sign in Madrid, Spain, because my great-great-grandmother, Soviak, or her English name, Sophie Lane, was human trafficked by colonizers when she was taken from Labrador on a ship over to Europe, and then she was featured and exploited in a human zoo for about a year in Madrid, Spain. So it felt like I saw that land back poster for the first time to understand that it had been an amplified message in Madrid for a spiritual reason as well. So I really, really appreciate that. And that's when I began to understand more deeply the reason that the exploitation of land is heavily interrelated and integrated with the issues causing the national crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and also with the issues of the exploitation of land. So I really appreciate you acknowledging these things and speaking about it as well. It means the world to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I am a settler colonist. I'm mostly French on this side. You know, my name is Paul Hawken, you know, and he was, my great grandfather was Paul Hawken, and he actually went to San Francisco not to get gold, 1849, but to sell books on Catholicism, which is, I joke and say, it started a long string of small business failure in my family. You know, I mean, anyway, and he went back to being a farmer, but I just feel like, how can I say this? Coming from me, I don't want to sound patronizing. That's I'll be very careful. But the thing is that the Indigenous voice, the Indigenous wisdom holders, the Indigenous ways of knowing, you know, are still treated as sort of like, yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Or yeah, that's really important, you know, but you know, the real action is, you know, in energy and wind and batteries and EVs and Elon Musk, you know, and I think it's to complete the other way around. That's upside down and backwards, actually, because what you're seeing, and not that we don't want progress in renewable energy, of course we do. I'm not sure that we need Teslas, but we definitely need EVs. And we need that progress, and thank you, and grateful to everybody, and the engineers and the scientists and the people making all that sort of stuff. But again, I feel like, you know, and then the technologists talking about direct air capture, sucking the carbon out of the air, and you know, and again, it's just like when the settlers and the colonists, you know, came, you know, and not seeing the treasure that was here, but it was in people's hearts and minds and their knowledge and their traditions and the learnings that happened over thousands and thousands of years, you know, and so forth. And so I just want to say, I feel like that understanding of this earth wisdom is earth wisdom embodied in 5,000 cultures. And that is an Alexandria library, if there ever was one, you know, and a lot of it has been lost. We know that. It's tragic that that's so, but there's no excuse to lose anymore, you know, and there's no excuse to think of it as less or other when we, in fact, are lessening the earth and we are other. I say we, I'm talking about European colonists, neoliberal, capitalist, extractive culture, you know. And again, that's that figure ground thing. And, you know, when I wrote the book, I mean, it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's this hero, you know, liberal Supreme Court justice, who actually reinforced the doctrine of discovery, you know, in a Supreme Court ruling, and, you know, blocking ownership, a land back, you know, claim that was being made in the United States, and used the papal edict from 14, whatever it was, 84. I don't know, you know, so it's deep. This shit is deep, you know, it really is, you know, and I don't know what to do except to try to listen, really, and then be faithful to what I'm hearing, as opposed to, you know, like knowing. I don't know.
Thank you.
Sorry, go for it. Melanie, do we have time for one more question, or? Yes, I actually wanted to ask both of you, maybe the three of you actually, in a few sentences or less, like, how do you envision because it's an exercise I do a lot for myself. How do you envision your community specifically, and that can be defined whatever way you want, in if we were to succeed in what we're trying to do here? Because I'm really tired of the idea of that the future, I live in so-called Toronto, the future is just going to be the same Toronto, but with like silent EVs and maybe a little bit better public transit. I think that's so boring and bleak. And I think, I'm imagining much more stuff. And so I'd love to hear from all of you and how are you imagining your specific communities if we succeed here in what we're trying to do?
Wow. Bryanna, you have community, right? But I mean, in some ways.
Yeah, I guess the community where I'm from in Labrador, I would want to keep it cold. That's a really big concern for me because when I was born in 1997, in July, there was snow still in Labrador, very briefly, but there was snow, and there's a lot of issues with people falling through the ice right now when they go ice fishing up north. So it's affecting us capturing our food. And when my grandfather, he came down from Coudrock in Quebec down to Labrador on a dog team, he was able to read the snow to know the direction in which he had to go to be able to get down to Labrador to move there to meet my grandmother. So knowing now how the ice melting is affecting people in my community and our way of living is really frightening to me. So I really want to keep it cold here.
It's interesting being a writer because writers socially distance, so COVID to me was like a blessing. like I didn't have to have any more excuses, for socially distancing. We were a team, but we're a virtual team. And when I think of community, I realize, and just being very frank, that my community is all over the world. It's like extraordinary human beings, and but I live in a community here in Mill Valley, California, that has become just infused by very wealthy people from the tech industry. And I raised my children here, and it was very, very different. I mean, you could raise children here, you could afford to live here, you could, all those sort of things. And now, Range Rovers line up at the elementary school picking up their children. I mean, we walk to school, for Christ's sakes. It's just so brittle. And so my wife, my wife's Italian Argentinian, and she is a healer. We bought a farm in Baja, in El Pescadero in Baja Sur, and in the Huerta, and which is the agricultural heart of Pescadero, and where the aquifer comes up from the eastern hills or mountains, and as a healing center. And I feel like that community there that we just sort of happened into is such a beautiful community, and so we're thinking that that's where we want to be, because there is no community where I live in Mill Valley. I'm, with all due respect, I'm not saying that people aren't great people, but there just isn't. And I don't think you can form one here because you can't afford to live here. And so we're leaving. And I'll still have my community that's all over the world, and I'm not going to lose those people. But it's funny that we're kind of in that formative stage. It's like, where do we want to live, and who do we want to be with, and who do we want to celebrate with? And it's so interesting there because, I'll stop soon, but there's a Plaza Depot down there in Mill Valley. I've gone there for the last 2 years, and only once in 2 years have I run into somebody I know. It's crazy. This town only has 8,000 or 9,000 people. And then in El Pescadero, I mean, you just run to people you know everywhere, and you talk, and you have time, and you stop, and you share, and you laugh, and you give something, or you say, "How is your daughter?" You know, and you bring up. I mean, it's like life. To me, it's like life, and I think a lot of us miss it. And I'm talking about in the U.S. particularly. I don't know in other places so well, but we're missing that. I was missing that, and so it's a really great question, Eleanor. For us.
Sorry, Paul. Thanks so much for that question, Allie. Absolutely. And thank you everyone for following with us in this conversation and imagining your own communities. Allie, I absolutely love that question because, you know, for us, like I'm also fairly new to this work, and you know, just coming to the realization that like there's nowhere to go you know, like to avoid the climate crisis. Like there's just nowhere to be other than in your community. And so we're trying really hard to root where we are and to build that community here, and to have that, you know, like our front yard is a permaculture food forest in evolution. And you know, we're just really trying to pull the community in rather than sort of, you know, rather than moving out and doing our thing elsewhere. So like trying to bring that community together. So I really appreciate that question. Now, we do unfortunately need to wrap, as much as I want to keep going for hours more. We had way too little time to dig into everything that we want to, but as we wrap, we did want to invite another voice into this conversation, another person who brings amazing energy to send us off on our way. He happens to be a good friend of yours, Paul, as you've shared. Do you want to share a few words about AY before we share his anthem?
I sure will. I was, Rick, green room. I was in a green room in Kansas City, and I had to give this talk to, like, I don't know, 1,100 people. There's 110 mayors. The lieutenant governor was there. It was like, you know, okay. And so I don't use notes. I just speak extemporaneously. And so you go to the green room and you're just like, okay, chill, calm down. And just like, you know, and I went in there, and then this guy came in, A.Y. Young, hip hop artist from Kansas City, where I was, you know, all-star basketball player, Eagle Scout. I know a lot of this now. I knew some of it then. His parents were amazing activists in Kansas City. Beautiful. I found that out later. One of them is a legislator. Anyway, he came up with two of his band members, and we just started laughing and goofing. And you'll see a T-shirt of him right now. I had a regular shirt and a sport coat, you know, whatever. And I took off my shirt and put on his T-shirt. And I went and gave my talk, and then I came back, and then he was going to go on stage. And the person who introduced me was sort of like, ladies and gentlemen, this is Paul Hawken. He's rah, rah, rah. You know, I go, wow. I don't care about that, but don't introduce AY that way. And so I said to the person, can I introduce AY? Because by this time I felt like I knew him. And so I went out there, and when I was young, I produced concerts and for the Grateful Dead, the Warlocks, Big Brother, the holding company, Janis Joplin, and so forth in San Francisco way back. And so I knew how to introduce an act. And I forgot about it. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is such a stiff, you know, audience, you know, in suits and everything. I said, just give it up for AY, you know. It's like just completely went into a whole nother persona. And we've become really fast friends. He is on the board of directors of regeneration.org. And he was at COP. He sang the song you hear in the Blue Zone to 1,000 people. And they, all 1,000 people were dancing, standing up before the song was finished. And he is my teacher when it comes to joy. And I said, you know, this has to be the joyous expression of purpose. And so this is AY singing the Regeneration song.
That's
Yo, dude, I've been reading this book called The Regeneration, and it's by this dude named Paul Hawken, and like, it's all about like regeneration's like, kind of like recreating all that was lost, and how like humans and nature, we have to come together, right, to like power, like change and make this happen. And so I made a song. Like I think it could be like the anthem. Let me show you, man. I'll show you the song really quick on here, real fast.
What's that?
Oh, yo, this is the battery to it, bro. Like, I actually power, this is solar, and I store energy in batteries, and that's why it's called the battery tour. And I use it to power all my concerts. And I also made the whole album, all this music I'm making, off of renewable energy, off of this thing. So here, let me show you, dude. I'll just like walk you through the record, because like you gotta really feel the lyrics and stuff. And it's all about changing the world, right? And if anyone's listening, they just, it's the vibe, you know what I'm saying? You feel me, bro?
Oh, sister, mister, look who's made our minds up.
We can't make our minds up, we gotta come together.
Now I can't find the reasons not to give up.
All the change makers, we can't give up,
Teachers, leaders, dreamers, let's go. They always take the right away. Leave the bell and make
Here's the chorus.
We can change the world. Is that a lie they told us? We can change the world. We'll shine a light back on us. We can change the world. So we got to come together now. We got to come together now. Got to come together. See, I don't like it any more than you do.
But everyone's ignorant,
But in your
sometimes, right?
ignorance, that bliss is
We
for.
can't avoid these issues, we gotta come together.
So it's about time be humble and realize that we are one and the same, unique and one of a kind. 'Cause brighter days come ahead when we join together. Put your best foot forward, go and make an effort. This is AY, I spoke to Akon, Marvin gave me in the grapevine. Let's have a great time, let's change the world, influence great minds. I'm trying to paint my version
I'm
of
just trying to
Picasso.
change the
This
world
is
and bring it
colossal.
together,
So they always take the right away. Leave the bell and make it pay. We can change the world. Is that a lie they told us? We can change the world. We'll shine a light back on us. We can change the world.
Yo, yeah, I know. I mean, I think it can be like an anthem for something, right? Like, I'm telling you, everybody's an outlet. If we can all just take a step toward regeneration, we can make it happen. Yeah, that's it, man.
I know we're jaded. I know we get complacent.
Wow, we've got to come together now. Paul, you've said it before tonight, and this is a really powerful anthem for change and so uplifting. We see this anthem building on moving words of yours about how individuals can't stop the burning of the forests or the bleaching of the coral reefs. But what we can do is become a movement. What was marginalized, derided, becomes honored and expected. What was suppressed becomes recognized as a principle. Movements are dreams with hands and feet, hearts and voices, are words that inspired us from your previous writing. Our local movements are building, and as we close, I'd like to invite everyone to share what we are taking with us from this conversation. Paul, what are you in for?
I just being with Bryanna and Eleanor just renewed and enlarged just the admiration, respect, and belief in the future that's present here today, embodied in people who have come here more recently. And have new eyes and beautiful minds and fantastic hearts. That's what I take away.
Thank you. Allie, how does this conversation affect your next actions and what you're in for personally and in your work?
The joyous purpose really spoke to me. I think sometimes when you do this for a long time, I guess it's not that long, but it feels like a long time, you get caught up into almost like routines of activism. And, every time there's a new media interview, I'll just go do the same lines of I'm afraid and I'm scared and blah blah. And I think today this conversation did regenerate a lot of my hope in the future. And I think I'll really be taking that idea of trying to spread the message with more joy and still have it be purposeful. So that's what I'm taking away.
And Bryanna, what are you taking in?
I think I'm taking away new friends. And I would also like to act more just in my own life in general, and hopefully influence others, and to heal more so that I can just show up more in spaces and feel like I belong there. And just, I think doing the work to do that will help me just be more present and make even more connections like this. Thank you.
That's really exciting, and we would be honored to call you our friend. So everyone in the audience, if you're using the chat, please do share what you're in for. Let's make this movement visible. We've come together tonight because we're all in for a conversation. Maybe you're in for letting this percolate and seeing what resonates tomorrow. Whatever is sitting with you is the right thing. You are the most important voice in your life and a trusted voice in your network. You probably know that it can be as simple as a conversation around your dinner table, a walk in the park with a friend, your workplace or your community group or association. So how will you be in conversation going forward? For our drawdown movements, we're going to be exploring further national collaboration with action planning components, of course, with that commitment to diversity and in particular to Indigenous voices. And across the country, local community engagement is happening. We'll be absolutely thrilled to connect with you if this work speaks to you and you want to get engaged. Please do visit the websites of our drawdown groups and WaterDocs and sign up for newsletters to stay in touch. Whatever you do, whoever you are, you have a place in contributing to life. So thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you to all of my conversation partners and to the organizers and the many hands who made this happen in the background. Paul, what closing words would you like to leave us with tonight?
I would just say thank you, Melanie. Thank you for organizing and bringing us together so beautifully and for what you do. I would close with a biological metaphor and the dream of every cell, and we have 30, 40 trillion in our body. The dream of every cell is to become 2 cells, right? And we're made of cells. And so our dreams, our imagination, our understanding within us, we're individuals, we become a dyad, and then 4, and then 8, 16, 32, 64, we're just like cells. And I'm just inspired by all of you, everyone, and especially I have cells in me too. They want to become 2 cells, and I feel like that's what we did tonight.
Well, folks, thank you so much. If we are down to my little cell here after watching such an incredible diversity, such an incredible conversation, hope it's not a letdown, but I've been with you all week long, and it's been such an incredible journey. So first of all, thanks to Paul Hawken, to Bryanna Brown, to Allie Rougeot, Melanie Hoffman, and A.Y. Young, who came to us via that anthem. Thank you so much for that incredible conversation. And I think it's a perfect wrap up to this week, a week in which we've been taken on so many roads, through so many stories, watched so many films, met so many amazing people from all over the world. And the combined messages of Drawdown and Regenerate is exactly, I think, what we need to hear, right now, together. And I can't help thinking of James Baldwin, who's one of my other favorite authors, who reminds me every day that we have the capacity to begin again, or to fail better all the time, every day, and to tap into this power of regeneration and renewal and healing. And, there's a lot of things going against us. I don't need to name the list, but we have so many things going for us. The energy of young people. We have the wisdom of indigenous cultures. As Paul said, the Alexandrian library, which is a gift, not an obstacle. And we have each other, and we have people like you on this call who care enough to be here and to actually feel like you can be part of the cells. You can make the cells expand and grow. So again, thank you to all of you. Thanks especially to our presenting partners tonight, Drawdown Toronto, Drawdown Alberta, Drawdown BC, for their support of ReSurge and WaterDocs. And please check out the websites, regeneration.org as well, for Paul's new book and his movement, for more information about how you can get involved, take action, and make a difference. And just a couple little business points here. Remember, ReSurge and WaterDocs, the film festival, continue on demand until November 30th. And as I said earlier, as of tomorrow, we'll be reducing the cost of the all-access festival passes. You can watch all the 40-plus films, all the panels, from $25 to $12.50. Yes, if you do a little math, that's half off until the end of the month. Okay, so hope you can follow up on that and come celebrate with us this 10th anniversary of the WaterDocs Film Festival. Info at waterdocs.ca/ReSurge Festival. Thank you for celebrating this anniversary with us. And remember to share the festival with your friends. Expand on all those cells. Let's let people show how amazing the action is in our community. And just a behind the scenes thank you to James and Ben and Suzanne and Melanie and Stan from WaterDocs for having the faith in me to be your host again. It's always a pleasure, a privilege, and an honor. And I would like to leave you with this thought from my mom, who said, "Stop hoping for better, be better." So I'll leave you with that. Thank you. Merci. À la prochaine. See you next year.